Initial suspicion. It started with the little things, the tiny cracks in his armor that I never noticed before. It was always something small. A phone call he'd take in another room, an email notification he'd hastily dismiss when I walked into the room, or the way he'd suddenly become distant during our conversations. At first, I brushed it off as stress from work. He had been working long hours at the office lately, and who could blame him? We both knew how demanding his job could be. But then there were other signs, subtle changes in his routine, like coming home late without calling, or leaving for meetings on weekends. I tried to convince myself that everything was fine, but deep down, a gnawing feeling grew stronger each day. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that these weren't just random occurrences, they formed a pattern of secrecy. And if there's one thing I can't stand, it's being kept in the dark. Confrontation. One evening, after another week of unanswered questions, I decided enough was enough. As we sat together on the couch watching TV, I turned to him and asked point blank, "What's going on?" His eyes darted away from mine, and for a moment, I saw panic flash across his face. That alone told me everything I needed to know. "I don't know what you mean," he said finally, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to my ears. "Work has just been crazy." "Don't give me that," I snapped, surprising even myself with the sharpness in my voice. "You've been acting weird for weeks now. Are you seeing someone else?" His reaction confirmed my worst fears. He froze, his jaw tightening as he stared at me. For a split second, I thought I might have been wrong. But then he spoke, and his words cut deeper than any knife ever could. "How dare you accuse me of that?" he spat, rising from the couch. "After everything we've been through?" Everything we've been through. Those words echoed in my mind long after he stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. They haunted me because they were true. In some ways, they still were. But if what I suspected was real, then those words would also ring hollow. Evidence of infidelity. That night, sleep eluded me. Instead, I found myself pacing around the house, my mind racing with possibilities. If he was lying, where would I find proof? My hands trembled as I picked up his phone from the kitchen counter. I hesitated, guilt tugging at me for invading his privacy, but curiosity won out. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. Then I noticed it. A string of messages hidden under a generic contact name, Alex. Curiosity turned to dread as I opened the conversation. Photos scrolled past my vision, pictures of them laughing together, holding hands, kissing. My stomach churned as I read their exchanges, filled with promises and declarations of love. Love. How could he say such things to her while pretending to care about me? But the biggest shock came later, when I dug deeper into his emails. There, buried among invoices and meeting schedules, was the truth. Divorce papers. Or rather, lack thereof. He wasn't divorced. Not yet. All this time, he'd been leading me to believe he was free to start a new life with me, all while maintaining his marriage to someone else. Someone who probably didn't even know about us. The weight of it crushed me. Every word he'd ever whispered to me felt tainted, every memory tainted by lies. Betrayal doesn't come much worse than this. Emotional impact. For days, I couldn't function. Work became unbearable. Friends called only to hear silence on the other end of the line. And food lost its taste entirely. Grief overwhelmed me in waves, sometimes so intense that I couldn't breathe. Anger burned hot and fast, followed by moments of crushing sadness. How could I have let this happen? Why hadn't I seen it sooner? Self-doubt crept in relentlessly. Was I not good enough? Had I driven him away somehow? These thoughts spiraled until I realized I needed help. Not just from friends, but from professionals. Therapy became my lifeline, a place where I could untangle the mess of emotions swirling inside me. Slowly, I began to understand that none of this was my fault. He chose to lie. He chose to betray me. And though it hurt beyond measure, acknowledging that gave me a strange sense of power. Relationship context. Before all this, our relationship had been beautiful. We met at a mutual friend's party 2 years ago. And from the start, There was an undeniable connection. We shared a love for hiking, cooking, and old movies. Our conversations flowed effortlessly, and within months we were inseparable. When he told me he was recently divorced and ready to move forward, I believed him completely. Who wouldn't? We talked endlessly about building a future together. He proposed 6 months ago, and I accepted without hesitation. Now, looking back, I wonder how blind I must have been. Maybe there were signs I missed, subtle hints I ignored because I wanted to believe in him so badly. But hindsight is cruel, and dwelling on it wouldn't change anything now. Aftermath. Life after discovery became a blur of appointments, paperwork, and soul-searching. Divorce proceedings loomed ahead, and though painful, I knew it was necessary. Financial independence became a priority, and I threw myself into learning everything I could about managing money and planning for the future. Each step forward felt like climbing a mountain, but I refused to give up. Mentally, the journey was harder. Nightmares plagued me, replaying scenes from our relationship over and over again. Some nights I cried until I fell asleep. Others I simply stared at the ceiling, too numb to feel anything. Support groups online became a sanctuary, where women shared their own stories of betrayal and heartbreak. Their strength inspired me, reminding me that I wasn't alone. Personal growth. Slowly I began to rebuild. Therapy taught me coping mechanisms, and exercise became my outlet. Running became my favorite activity, not just because it cleared my head, but because it made me feel strong. Stronger than I ever had before. New friendships blossomed, ones built on honesty and trust. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to open up fully, sharing parts of myself I'd hidden away during the relationship. Dating eventually entered the picture again, though cautiously. I dated casually at first, testing the waters and rediscovering what I wanted in a partner. What surprised me most was how much I enjoyed being single. Without the pressure of a relationship, I explored hobbies I'd neglected, traveled places I'd dreamed of visiting, and embraced spontaneity. Life, it turned out, was richer without him in it. Reflection. Sitting here today, reflecting on everything that's happened, I feel gratitude. Gratitude for the friends who stood by me, for the strangers online who offered advice and encouragement, and for the therapist who helped me navigate the darkest days. Most importantly, I'm grateful for myself, for choosing to fight back instead of crumbling under the weight of betrayal. Revenge wasn't about destroying him. It was about reclaiming my power. By exposing his lies, standing tall during the divorce, and building a better life for myself, I showed him and everyone else that I wouldn't be broken, that I deserved better. And now looking back, I see how far I've come. If anything, this experience taught me resilience. It taught me that love isn't defined by perfection but by effort, communication, and respect. And most importantly, it taught me to value myself above all else. Because no matter what happens next, I'll always carry this lesson with me. Never settle for less than you deserve.